Hello, everyone who is coming to us. Well, I guess we're coming to you. My name is Alex Kuhlman, one of the co-founders of Mobius, along with Amy and Erica. You are coming to us on the second day of NPI, and I thought it might be fun just to get a little reaction from those who are attending this second day. How is everyone? You see what you're missing? Come and join us. What you can do is you can at least join us through these live streams. And just so you know, NPI is the professional development arm of Mobius Executive Leadership, where we bring together practitioners, friends, clients, and amazing folks such as Andrew White, who is with us here today. Andrew White is the Associate Dean at the Exec Ed School, Said School of Business at Oxford University. And his main role, amongst many of them, of which he's a consultant and a mediator and a practitioner in our field, he develops and leads programs. But he essentially takes the resources and the expertise of the university and he matches it up with leaders in the real world, if I could be so bold. And so the role that you carry must be fascinating, combining all the different talents housed in the university with the leaders of the world that you're playing with today. And I would say the formal role is quite an amazing job you must carry. But I would love just to do a more personal introduction as well, because I've had the luxury of just spending a few minutes on a few occasions. And you have a unique ability to just create this comfort, kind of like what you're doing now. And yeah, exactly. And I would love for all of us just to witness not only the expertise that this gentleman carries, but the experience of being in his presence. And so on behalf of Amy, Eric, and I'd just love to thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. So thank you.
So Alex, thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here this evening. So I wanted to start by really just thanking Amy and the whole Mobius team for what they've created in this space, in this room. I've been, like many of you, to many conferences, and I've been to many retreats, and I've always found that I've had one foot in one camp and another foot in another camp. And to come here and to feel the Sangha, to feel the community, to feel what's been created is truly, truly special. So thank you. Thank you for what you've done. So tonight, I want to talk about some experiences that I've had and some work that I've done in helping leaders step through and transcend some of the challenges of the 21st century. And to kick this off, I want to tell you a story. So over the past few years, I've had the privilege of attending the World Economic Forum at Davos. And I've done that primarily to conduct research. And the two questions that I'm often asking CEOs is, how is your job changing? And secondly, how strong is the pipeline of people coming through the organization that have the skills to lead? And if you're interested more in that research, if you Google CEO report and Side Business School, you can download the report that we did. But one conversation I had 3 years ago, I think will stay with me for a long, long time. And it went something like this. For the past 40 years, it feels like I've been climbing a mountain. And that mountain is my own leadership journey. It's the journey of the company that I lead. And to some extent, it's the industry that I've been part of building. And he said this, the problem is, I'm standing on top of the mountain. And in many ways, I should feel happy, content, proud about what we've achieved. The problem is, the mountain's crumbling beneath me, and I'm surrounded by fog. And if I'm really honest, I don't know where to take this company. And I sat there, and it took me a moment to take it in. This was somebody who was running multiples of billions of dollars, of euros, who should be alpha. That's what we expect. But there was a brutal honesty about what he was saying. And there wasn't a share price crisis. There wasn't an activist investor. There wasn't a crisis with social media. There were none of these things, but he was sensing and picking up on something. So I'm going to talk more about what I did with that conversation, but my invitation to you now is to join me in a guided meditation that I've created. And the question is, where are you on that mountain? Where's your organization? And where are your clients? So if you'd like to just take a moment to settle. And when you're ready, just to gently and softly close your eyes. So as we come together this evening, my invitation to you is just to settle into the gentle flow of your breathing. The inflow and the outflow. Settling into the rhythm of your own body. And becoming aware of those around you. The community contained in these four walls. The companies, the vocations, the countries, and the Sangha, the sense of community, what we are doing, and what we could do. And now I'd like you to think about a mountain. Maybe one you've climbed, or you've seen a picture of, or just one that comes to your imagination. This mountain represents you, your journey, your vocation, your leadership, and also the organization you work for, and maybe even the industry you've been part of creating. I'd like you to sense, where are you on that mountain? Maybe starting out on a journey with a deep sense of adventure or anxiety. Maybe halfway up. Maybe at the top. Maybe heading down the other side. Maybe in a valley. Do you have a clear sense of direction? Or are you wandering without a sense of direction? Have a look around at the weather. Is it a sunny day? Is it cloudy? Are there storms on the horizon? Are you lost? Is the path in front of you clear? Now take a look around at your team, colleagues that you work with. Do they have a clear sense of direction? Are they progressing with you or pulling in different directions? What about your clients, the people you work with? Are they aware of where they're at? Can they see the risks that you see? Are you fulfilling your highest vocation with them? Think about your journey to date, the people that have supported you at school, at university, in your first job, in other ways that you started out in life, and also those that didn't support you. And take a quiet moment to thank all of them for whatever way they've helped you get to where you are today. Take a look inside yourself. Are you being authentic to who you are and the values you hold? Are you proud of your achievements? Are you leaving the legacy on the worlds that you impact, that you want to? Come back to the image of the mountain. What does the horizon look like? The route to get there. Is it clear? Confused? Imagine for a moment you weren't there. How would the team cope? Your clients cope? Are there strong successors? Would they know how to advance without you? To invite you to come back into your body. Into the gentle flow of the in-breath and the out-breath. So before we move on, I thought I'd give you an opportunity just to take a couple of notes about anything that might have really landed with you, anything you want to inquire into further in your own time, anything you'd like to take to maybe your coach or a therapist, or just weave into your own personal practice. Just a couple of moments to do that before we move on. Okay, so let me take you back. So I come back from Davos, I meet up with my colleague, and we've spoken to a number of people about this story, and no one's disagreeing with us. So I'm sat in my office, and we start to get on the whiteboard, and we start to sketch out what does this look like, and what's going on here, And what do we think that this was pointing to? And we started to get creative. And we said, well, it's clear that certain companies have been built over decades. Certain industries have been built over decades. And he's clearly looking at things on the horizon, like climate change, like new and old competitors, competitors coming into the marketplace, the fourth industrial revolution, automation, regulation in financial services, and consumers that are changing. There's something else here going on in terms of an ego-based world and a soul-based world. We started to think about ideas that came out of the work of Joseph Campbell, the spiritual worlds of living and dying and cycles of living and dying. Is he talking about going into an abyss or a place of transformation? Is he sensing something? And all these other people that we're talking to, are they sensing something? So we're in the middle of this creative process. My PA, my secretary, comes and knocks on my door and says, Andrew, there's a client outside, and they'd like you to come and visit them. So this client was potentially worth not an inconsiderable amount of money. So that's putting that in English. I'll put it in American English. It was potentially worth millions and millions of dollars. So I go in and I sit down, and they said, well, can you tell us some of the cutting-edge thinking that's going on? And I thought, well, let me just get up on the whiteboard, and I recreated it with them. And they said, this is fantastic. This is absolutely what we're going through. And we left it there. So I went back to my office with my colleague, and between the two of us, we said, actually, if we're really going to get into this, we need to work in a different way. And that's when we said, could we create a guided meditation, a visualization that we could use with senior leaders? And it's the version of what I've just taken you through tonight. So we started scripting this out, and if I'm honest, I could feel in the pit of my stomach discomfort, anxiety. So I'm going to take this into a top team of a CEO, and there's one side of me saying this is really necessary, and there's another side saying, you work at Oxford University, this is crazy. And so I've got this internal battle going on. And so, we carried on with our lives, and then my colleague who was running the procurement process from our side came to me and said, Andrew, they've come to us. What they'd like us to do is a day as a taster. So not just to put in a proposal, but actually give them a taster. And I think we should do this meditation thing. And I thought, you're crazy. So, no time to build trust, no time to build rapport, millions of euros on the table in terms of a deal, and said, no, I really think we should do this. So off we go on the plane. We arrive. I still have this feeling inside of myself that this is a crazy thing to do. We create this as a huge mat, which we don't display until afterwards. We take them through the meditation, and we say, what we'd like you to do is stand where you think you are on the process. And we want you to talk either from a business point of view or a personal point of view. And I was blown away at the honesty that came out about where they were as individual leaders and where the organization was. And things that in my experience may have taken 5 days to get to, we were getting to in 20 minutes in the middle of a procurement process. Now, I'm then left with a dilemma because we've opened all the stuff up. And so again, I'm split in half. There's a side of me which says this is just brilliant business development. Leave them in a place where they're desperate for more. There's another side to me, which is the ethical coach, which says this is, you have to help these people. Anyway, so that was the first real outing of this. And I then started to take it into other environments and to start to see where it worked. And I worked with a CEO and a top team in Europe. And I'd had no time with them before, so again, just going straight in. So we're in a wonderful hotel. There's 20 of them. There's the CEO, there's the 20 direct reports and some other direct reports. All male except for one female HR director. So very 20th century in terms of how they looked. And again, I'm looking at this thinking, this is not going to go well. And take them through the process, lay the mat out on the floor, and say, I'd want you to just stand in where you feel you are. To my shock, the CEO jumps up to his feet. He walks straight down and stands here and said, if you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have been on the summit. If I'm really honest with you, I don't know where this business is going. I can't see the future. We've built something that was for the 20th century, and I don't know how it's going to work in the 20th century. These aren't small businesses. These are billions of euros of turnover. And if I'm really honest, I feel like my life is falling apart. Things aren't going well with my family, and I just have lost the sense of who I am and where I'm at. And he sits down. And I'm thinking, goodness, I wasn't quite prepared for this. Something's going on. And then one after another came up with just this profound humility and honesty about where they were, where the business was, where the industry was that they were part of. And I then used it with another group. And I planned to have a day with them to do some of the other things that are in the slide deck that I'm going to take you through. And right at the last minute, this got compressed to 3 hours. As we often know things can, those of us who work in the corporate world. So I took them through the process, and the HR director came up to me afterwards and said, I have a real problem with you and your work. Now, if you've ever had that, at that point, you take a deep breath, you prepare yourself, and she said, you do not know the power of what you're doing. You do not know the power of what you're opening up, and in 3 hours, this is irresponsible. So I took a deep breath. We're not going to go into blame here. I said, well, if I could just let you know that actually this was compressed yesterday, and this was meant to be a day-long session. And so what I began to discover was that this was opening up something. And that it needed to be followed up. It needed to be held in a bigger container, that there was a willingness to go to places that I personally hadn't seen before. And it wasn't just about coaching. It wasn't just about the individuals. It was about the company. It was about the industry. It was about where they're at. And I've done it on numerous occasions and never not had such a similar response. I was with a law firm last week. And when I mentioned the word guided meditation, there was a silence at the end of the conference call. And I thought, this is not appropriate. So we quickly pivoted. And so rather than going through the exercise that you went through, we simply got them to plot their clients on here. Yes. And so those of you who are in the work, and it was brilliant. They actually helped me completely reframe this. And then through plotting their clients, I said, well, therefore, where are you on this? And we began to open up a whole conversation about where they were and where they were struggling. And just go into this place, which I say is not just about the individual. It's about where the company is, and to some extent, in some places, where the industry is as well. And so what I'm going to take you through this evening really is the process that I use and how I hold that conversation. And in the spirit of this being the next practice institute, if you can see a use for this, I'm going to distribute these slides. And please use them. I don't consider it proprietary in that sense, if it's useful. So after the debrief, and I have a kind of a map similar to this size up here, we then start to really take a step back. We have a coffee break. And I then start to say, well, okay, 2 questions I want us to sit with. What is it that you're not discussing that you need to talk about? Now, at this point, half the room look at the floor. Yeah? So it's stuff that they just can't bring themselves to have a conversation about within how the business is operating. Most of them know it, or at least a proportion of them know it, but getting that out on the table is not easy. And then the second one, what do you always discuss but never resolve? And at this point, half of them laugh. Because it's the things that just go round and round in organizations that never get resolved. And this can be a day in terms of a discussion. Really in opening up, what is it that you need to talk about? What are you always talking about that's not resolved? And I think if you look at things like the financial crisis, if you look at things like what happened in the automotive industry with the diesel problems, this was about leadership It was about what's going on in the organization. And it was where they just weren't having the conversation. If you think about what Ed Schein said last night, that it begins with a conversation. This is where we start to bring these things out. And then moving on to what spaces do you need to create to have these conversations? Because something's not going right. You know, in a big organization, you've got so many committee meetings, you've got so many consultants, you have so many advisors, you have so many spaces, but for some reason, it's not working. It's not allowing you to have the conversation you need to have. And therefore, if you had those conversations, what would be different in 3 years if those things were discussed, if those things were acted upon? And so for me, this is really about understanding what the strategic edge is that they're at, to starting to weave together those things of the leadership challenges, the business challenges, and in some cases where the industry's at as well. And then very quickly, we get to why we exist. What are we here for? Not purpose as constructed through a PR agency, but purpose as constructed through what do we do? How do we apply our resources? How do we deploy our capital? Are we here for profit? Are we here for our employees? Are we here for customers? And are we here for society? So let's think about those things. And those of you who are familiar with something called Mentimeter, it's an amazing tool. You can start to get them to put these in rank order. And in a very simple way, and we could do it across the whole of a group like this, and to start to pull out where are their real priorities? Where does it sit? And again, it becomes uncomfortable because the PR side of the business will want to say, well, all these things are important. But as you'll see, as we'll move on through the slides, you can begin to see where certain decisions have to be taken, where leadership really starts to connect into the organization. These things can start to become in conflict, certainly in the short term. And if organizations are going to transcend the challenges of the 21st century, like climate and technological shifts and gaps between rich and poor, we're going to have to start to get into this and consciously get into it, rather than just living in a world of ignorance about where we are on that mountain-to-mountain journey. So what we start to do is complete this thing which I've called the purpose pendulum. So this is the definition that's come out of a piece of research we've done on purpose, that it's an aspirational reason for being which inspires and provides a call to action for an organization, its partners, and stakeholders, and provides a benefit to local and global society. So that's the kind of the definition which we're working with, which has come out of a large research project which we've done with EY. And then very quickly, you can find that there are certain, let's call them stories, certain things going on within the organization where they're off purpose, where it's not aligned, where, and they know that, and it's not difficult to get to that conversation. And conversely, where are we on purpose? And once we've started to understand this, we can look at what are the events, the situations that drive the pendulum from one side to the other. And then how do we bring about an equilibrium shift? And we're starting to move into the territory of action here. So what would it mean to pivot the organization to a place where it was aligned around this and not around this? So if you put this into the context of the law firm that I was working with, on the right-hand side, they would put things like certain clients they would consider off purpose. Certain activities, such as certain activities around tax, certain activities around certain legal stuff that they were doing, they would consider off purpose. But then they lit up when they're starting to talk about what's being on purpose, where they're really connecting up with a need in society, where they're helping review something that's gone wrong between the government and certain industries, and they're part of an inquiry into that. And you can see the energy shift in them when this starts to take place. And so this starts to get us onto the front foot in terms of where do you want to be, the pivots you need to make. One of the things I started to realize was that there were companies that were making decisions that put the greater good or society above short-term financial returns. And so there's a paper which you can get a free copy of, which was in Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago, where I talked about trajectory decisions, where the direction of the firm starts to take a radically different shift. And the two I talk about, one is CVS. So those of you who are not from the US, this is a healthcare retailer. They went through a process to understand their purpose and got to the point that it's about healthcare and really made that very explicit. They then realized that as you go to collect your prescription for your chest infection, you can buy a packet of cigarettes. You know? And so you would think the obvious thing would be to take the cigarettes out of the stores. The problem for them is that that's $2 billion of top-line revenue. Yeah? So we begin to see what it means to lead in this world when you have to have the boldness, the confidence to stand up to Wall Street and say we're taking a conscious decision in order to be a purpose-aligned organization, in order to progress in a positive way from mountain to mountain, in order to not fall into the abyss, but use that as a place of transformation, we're going to act in this positive way. The second was with Shell. They disposed of their tar sands operation at a cost of $3.5 billion to them. They wanted to indicate they were transitioning to cleaner energy, and then they shifted some of that money into a green energy fund that started to drive them in that direction. And this is what I'm really interested in. I'm interested in when the leadership starts to shift. I'm interested in when the organization starts to shift and there's a concrete decision that starts to move that means that they are addressing the 21st century challenges that they're working with, and that's through the right type of leadership in their organizations. And so for me, when that comes together, the thing starts to sing. We start to see progress, I think, in the right way. And let's bring this back to us. I don't think this can happen just with a business school professor. I don't think this can happen just with a search firm. I don't think this can happen just with a consultancy. I don't think it can happen just with a coach or a therapist or a healer. But when we come together, there is something magical and special in this room that I think can start to drive more of this activity. And whilst these two incidents are small in the context of the global challenge that we face, to me they are microcosms of what could be if we start to roll that out at scale, if we start to see leaders go through these conversations, go through the development, go through the shadow work, go through the things which we know are necessary in order to be able to act and to move capital and to do the things which they have the responsibility to do. So in the paper, I went back and looked at the theory around transcending paradox and what that really meant. And the theory, which is a wonderful paper in the Academy of Management Review, talks about acceptance. And I think all of us have seen in our work that we don't really make progress with either people or with groups until there's an acceptance of where we are today. And then a confrontation. If you go look at the hierarchy of or the different stakeholders in that, where I talked about clients and profit and things, there are some things which are in conflict. And then the bravery to understand what the transcendence looks like. What are the decisions that need to be taken? And then I really try to unpack what are these decisions? What is it that we need to see, in my view, more of? So firstly, they are aligned with an explicit purpose statement. They represent a significant departure from the current modus operandi of the firm. They are often financially counterintuitive in the short term. They embody the espoused purpose of the firm in a financially significant strategic decision. They often contain a high degree of personal risk for the CEO and the senior leadership team, and they seek to combine doing the right thing with longer-term profitable growth. And so this is essentially what I want to talk to you about tonight. How do we lead leadership teams in all of our different capacities? And I think we all have a role to play in order to see more of these types of decisions happen. Because for me, it's these types of decisions which are the ultimate impact for those of us who work in the corporate world and in the government world with people who have their hands on on levers of power. And so at some point in the whole process, we begin to start to conclude. And often what they think is going to be a 2-day offsite translates into a 2-year piece of work. And where I really try to lead them that if this event is going to be a place in your history, what does the journey look like from here? And so, organizations are like people. There's always good. There's always something to take on the journey, in my view, in my experience. There's always something that they need to capture, something that they've created, something that they need to take forward. So what is it that they need to take with them? From their culture, from their values, from their engineering capabilities, from et cetera, et cetera. But it becomes clear that the things that they need to leave behind. That if this moment, these 2 days or 4 days are going to be a point in history, what do we need to leave behind? Then what do we need to transform? What do we need to actually start to bring into a different place? And then what do we need to create? And just in those 4 questions, I begin to see what the transition starts to look like. What does it mean when the rubber starts to hit the road? And we start to move towards action in doing that. So that is simply it. I wanted to convey just an essence of what I see in the world that I operate in, what I see happening, what I see emerging, what I see people connecting with. And I just wanted to leave some thoughts with you to conclude. The first is what I said before. I think we can only do this together. It requires a whole different set of capabilities to do this. And it requires us to come together and think like we haven't done before and what Mobius has created here. My learning was that the corporate world is more ready for this than certainly I thought. This was 2 or 3 years ago. That there was an openness and a willingness to go very quickly into the personal development space with a huge amount of vulnerability. And that not just being a personal journey, that being about a corporate shift and a corporate transition as well. So, for me, perhaps for you, we need to be braver in what we do because there is a willingness, there's an acceptance of these things. And it all comes together in decisions, I think, particularly in this world where they are responsible, the people we're serving, we're working with, for so much resource. It's in the decisions that the authenticity is manifest. And that's where the rubber, whatever metaphor you want to use, the rubber hits the road, really, really happens. I don't have all the answers. I'm on a journey myself to, with them, recognizing that as much as they need to shift, I need to shift in my own work on myself. And I want to conclude by just saying it's been a privilege talking to you this evening. Before I finish, I want to read something to you, which I think speaks to the second, if we go back, the second mountain. This is the bit I get a little nervous. I'm midway through writing a poetry book. And I'd like to read one of my poems to you this evening. I've never done this before. Nobody has ever seen this. So the poem speaks to the second mountain. And it combines or builds on the work of the poets that wrote about nature in the US, Henry David Thoreau, Tennyson, Wordsworth. It builds on the spiritual traditions that have all had a reflection and involvement in nature and talked about nature, and the practices of transformation that Amy so eloquently spoke about. So it speaks to the second mountain. I'm going to put up a picture. You may want to close your eyes as we do this. You may want to look at the picture. You may want to just listen in your own way. The poem's called Earth. Oceans and sky. Grasslands, desert and forest. Creatures of the ocean, of sky, of jungle, of savanna, and mountains. And us, in cities and villages and towns. What is beyond us? Beyond these identities and beliefs and conflict and countries, to the field beyond right and wrong, where we are one, where the touch of nature makes the whole world kin, united, beyond hurt and pain and fear and judgment, into the dance of masculine with feminine, of heaven with earth. Dancing as one, as this is all there is when we dance in Rummy's field. Dancing as one, as this is all there is when we dance in Rummy's field. Thank you.